My name is Josh Levine. My work predominantly deals with science and genetics, a lot of mutations. Mainly, I like to kind of base everything on the thoughts of maybe what the future may or may not hold, utilizing scientific principles that we're kind of just starting out dealing with now. Most of the time, my work has been dealing with much larger scale, the trophy heads that you see around. This is kind of my first foray into smaller pieces again. These are mixing and matching of kind of genetics of animals, the idea of like taking these small figurines. I thought going back to bronze, which is a material I haven't used since undergrad, was kind of an exciting and interesting thing for me. It's the first time I'm really ever showing them, so I'm a little anxious about what the response would be to them, as opposed to my bigger pieces, which I'm much more attuned with how they get responded to. These, they have the idea kind of behind them, or at least the sense of scale and size. Bronze itself has a historical sort of meaning and carries a lot of baggage with just that material itself. As far as in our culture, not just our culture, but ours in the human sense of culture. So I thought the idea of making these little animals, maybe thousands of years from now, when they're looking back at bronze, since it lasts for that long, they'll look back and it's like, wow, they had those weird animals back then, all the way then. So that was kind of some of the thinking behind that. Ramble them off to you, but I don't actually know them. They're very taken from the idea of like genus and species when you kind of name stuff. So they're bits and pieces of the actual animals that comprise these different ones. At least they're Latin names of it. Again, since I don't speak Latin, I don't recognize them offhand. But the idea is like if you were thinking of Charles Darwin kind of classifying the different animals on his trip to Galapagos, these would have been like those little mock-heads that he made of like, oh, Aspen, Tucket.
What drew you to this as an idea to start with?
Well, I thought, one, that it was kind of a natural, made sense with the rest of the body of my work. In all honesty, it was the sense of scale and knowing that I was going to be downsizing my studio from a much larger thing and wanted to kind of make these smaller objects. I also like the fact that in thinking not everybody has the room to put a giant sculpture in their living room. Most people have a coffee table or a bookshelf, and I thought that sense of scale, it's also much more intimate feeling to them, so that smaller scale you kind of can have this much more intimate relationship with the object itself as opposed to the larger interaction with some of the bigger pieces.
I like the fact that from a distance they look really familiar, and as you get drawn in and you suddenly come face to face, you realise, like you said, it's something that really doesn't exist.
Not quite right.
So not that they're admitting to anyways.
Do you go in with a real plan when you're creating them? Do you know exactly what you're going to be creating?
No.
Trial and error?
Yeah, I mean, and actually that's with all of my work. I'll start off with maybe some idea of something, because all my pieces at times are based on some sort of real animal at one point in time that I then kind of tweak and kind of think about, oh, I'm changing it this way. So with these, no, they kind of, I started out with a bunch of animals that I knew I was going to use, and I would cast waxes and chop them up and kind of reconfigure them. So it was really just kind of trial and error. I kind of do all my work that way. I feel like there's something nice about that spontaneity, at least for myself. Sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes it's a bad thing. I usually like to say that if you see a drawing, most of the time, not always, but most of the time, if you see a drawing that looks exactly like a piece, I did the drawing after I already started the piece or finished the piece, because usually my sketches are very loose and just kind of very roughed out, but nothing along the lines of really planned, or from this you say, oh, okay, yeah, he made that.
Could you maybe just mention a little bit about the trophy head series? Everybody
Sure.
always asks what the medium is, how you do it.
The trophy head series, these all, again, along the same lines, I was really, most of the time when you see trophy heads mounted on the wall, there's a lot more, especially exotic ones, there's a lot more to it than just, I shot an animal and had it mounted. There's, at least with the exotic ones, it's a status symbol. You end up having, it took a lot to take that safari trip to Africa, to go out into the field, to kill that animal, to then have it taxidermied, shipped back. So it's almost, it's a status of wealth in that sense, that collecting of things. And so I also feel that the art world and the collecting of art also kind of mimics those same sort of trophies. I have my Warhol on the wall here, so I was kind of making that association as well. And then, again, with the whole science and the genetics in that sense, the pieces all kind of are foam on the inside that get shaped, and then the outer material is an epoxy clay, like an epoxy resin, but in a clay form. So I don't have to actually bake it, but once it hardens, it can be sanded and machined and all worked out. And then it's a lot of airbrushing. So the final surface is airbrushed paint.
Where do you get your eyes?
Yeah.
They are all human taxidermy eyes. All my pieces, and they're always blue as well. So that it's a very, the blue eye thing was kind of the Aryan race, perfect race, sort of making that reference. But the human eyes are always there so that you can kind of get this sort of connection with the piece. You end up, emoting your own emotions because you look at it and there's something so familiar in staring at, the eyes, and the eyes being the window of the soul. So instead of that kind of cold, at times you equate like an animal's eyes kind of have these kind of colder stares to them. I wanted this to kind of have a little bit more of something that you related to. And so, you can really kind of create emotion by however I do the eyes in that sense and how you relate to them.
Do you have any discoveries as an artist going from large scale to small scale, or focusing your energies into a smaller?
Small scale is a lot tougher. A lot tougher. Yeah. At least for me, small scale is a lot more difficult. I find that working larger is much easier just because the scale of my hands are bigger. So in that sense, I find that working in a larger scale is a lot easier than in a small scale.
I missed the beginning of your talk, but is what happened to all these guys our fault, or is it just kind of interbreed? I don't know if you covered this. So
No,
what made me ask really is the expression on his face, which just bathed in pathos for me. It's so sad. He seems like such a nice bear. So then I look over here and I'm like, oh, is this just interbreeding that's gone awry, or is it human influence?
I like to say that they are human influence in that sense. I don't think it's a good or a bad thing. Like, I want to say that my art is, I'm not saying that us doing this to any of these things is good or bad. It's just a possibility of what might happen. And whether that's good or bad, who knows? I personally think it's kind of cool, and maybe the idea of, every so often when, as just recently in England, the calf born with two heads, that those sort of mutations happen naturally. So who's to say that maybe in the future this is just going to be a regular sort of occurrence, and we didn't have our hand in it in one way or another?
Other than the eyes, have you played with the idea of human-animal hybrids in your work at all?
No, not personally. I haven't. Just the eyes, yeah. And I think my talk is done.
I think we'll move on over to Dana's side. Thank you so much.